Okay, it's time. Maybe we can start. Okay. 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 Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for attending the keynote given by Nicolas Fränkel. First, let me give a short introduction on Nicolas. Since Nicolas is widely known in our community, and here I would like to copy the widely used introduction of Nicolas. Nicolas is developer advocate with more than 15 years experience consulting for many different customers in a wide range of contexts. He is usually working on Java, Java EE, and Spring technologies, but with focused interests like rich internet application testing, CI/CD, and DevOps. Currently, he's working for API 7.ai. Besides, he is also working as a trainer and a book author. All in all, Nicolas is a very active and experienced practitioner. Today, he would like to share with us his talk titled 20 Years in Software, the Bad, the Ugly, and Unspeakable. Let's welcome Nicolas. Nicolas, here's your stage.
Thanks a lot for this introduction. That's always awkward because this introduction is not supposed to be like read out loud. This introduction is supposed just to be on our website so that people can read it, but nobody, well, anyway, that's what is done is done. So thanks everybody to be here for this talk. In the start of the COVID time, I switched from like on-site conference to online conferences. And I found out that it's very hard to talk to my screen. That's very energy depleting. So if you want, of course, you don't need to do that. You can switch on your camera so I can see your face, your facial expression, and I can understand if you are frowning, if you are smiling, if my stupid jokes make you like smile or whatever, or if they are really, really bad. In all cases, if you have any question, any comment at any time, I welcome interaction. I mean, online conferences for me are the worst. It's really, really bad because we are like talking in the void. And yeah, so let's welcome interaction. Of course, if you have like question, welcome. If you want to wait until the end, welcome. Whatever suits you. I will try to show the chat. Hey, no worries if you don't want or cannot show your cam, it's fine too. This is my proposal for the talk. Well, when I say my proposal, in that case, you don't have any choice, because if you want to comment that it's not what you wanted, I have no chance to change it anyway. I will do my own introduction, but not on the official stuff, but on the unofficial that nobody knows about. Then I will talk about a bit about metrics, what are wrong in metrics, especially in software and software maintenance. Then a lot of trouble that come from organization. That's the reason why I left consulting, actually, I believe. Then some wrong stuff about people. And so with these three themes, I think I will have shown you everything that has gone wrong from my experience. And then it's up to you to find solutions. That I wish you good luck, because I think those are all hard problems. Anyway, so now it doesn't work. Yes, I'm Nicolas Fränkel. For 17 years, I was a consultant in different roles. So consultant might be a bit tainted term. Sometimes we are like contractor or for hire or whatever, but consultant is specific that I was not working for myself. I was working for a company that sold me to another company. And so the first company like paid my salary, and the second company paid the first company, and the first company, of course, like had to fight contracts and took a lot of money. But anyway, and in 17 years, I've seen quite a lot. The good thing is that I've like worked for many different customers with different ways to work, different industries, different methodologies, different teams, different people. And that was really, really good. But in the end, I became super dissatisfied because, well, I was paid to provide technical solutions to most of them were organizational problems. And when you are seen as a tech person, you have your little sandbox, and it's very easy to pinpoint the problem to an organizational issue. But the problem is you cannot solve it because you are a tech person. So your sandbox doesn't include organizational changes. So I left this industry, and now I'm a developer advocate. I do talks. And what's great with talks is that you can listen to me, you can apply what I'm telling, or you can completely discard. And in the end, I won't have this feeling of not having done my job, because when you're a consultant, you see people repeatedly failing over and over, and the solution is so simple. You tell them, nobody listens to you. That's really, really startling. The fun part. Now, normally, this is the slide where I show all my diplomas, all my titles, what I've achieved in life. The fun part is that I don't have any computer science degrees. I have degrees, but not in computer science. So everything that I learned, or let's say mostly of what I learned it by myself. So you might hear stuff that doesn't correspond to what you believe is the truth, to what you have been taught, but it's because I don't have formal education in IT. I just work a lot, read a lot, do a lot, and yeah. So not much theory, a lot of practice. That I already talked about. I've held multiple roles. So I started as developer, went to team lead, software architect, blah, blah, blah. I even, like for 20 years, I also taught at either universities or in the French system engineering schools. And now I'm developer advocate. I love development, really. I really love development. And as I mentioned, I don't have any like computer science background. So when I started my career, I started as like, I wouldn't say newbie, but as an intern. And so they finally hired me, the consulting company, and I was not alone in this case. It was in '91. There were a lot of people like chemistry engineers, agricultural engineers, and like also people who like were not IT specialists, who like went to IT because they didn't find any job in their industry. And so what they did is they put us on projects, and they like gave us the big book. My first language was Java, so they gave us the big book, and it was self-learning. So I went through all the chapters, blah, 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 and we all did the same. And then they made you code for a couple of months in the project. And after this couple of months, then they checked whether you were like good enough to code. So you were able to code or not. And the fun part is that for me, being a developer was a pinnacle. Like it was like my goal, because I was not a real developer. Remember, I have no formal education. And so they told me, yes, you're a developer. And I was super happy, really. It really made my day. And then there were people who didn't need it, of course. People who didn't know how to code. And then they got promoted to business analysts or project managers with higher paycheck and higher benefits. So that's my first personal disappointment about developers. In the industry, the developer is at the lowest level of the hierarchy. You start with being a developer, and then you are promoted. And of course, everybody knows that's just crap. And especially nowadays, it has started to change a bit, especially with people realizing that there are a lot more projects than developers. So finally, the balance tends to scale a bit towards developer, but at the beginning, it was really odd. I was told, hey, you know, okay, you're a developer now, but you must be really, really quick to make it to software architect, because all our projects, they are being outsourced to India. So 91, more than 20 years ago. Guess what? I made it to architect, but I'm still happy developing. And today you can still be a good developer and make a lot of money and not worry about that. So don't listen to all those crappy managers who have their own personal takes. That's really bad. Anyway, that was the beginning. I believe our industry is doomed. Yeah, that's very optimistic. I'm French, so please excuse me for that. And it comes from at least 3 different problems. I will try to explain them in turn. First, metrics. We love to be engineers. We love to be scientific minded. So in order to improve, we want metrics. We measure, we improve, and it's a mess. The second, organizations. Organizations today are very badly managed. The bigger the organization, the older the organization, the worse it is. I will show you a couple of examples. I still believe that even in the realm of computer science, you can do some research, find solutions about that. I mean, cross-pollination for the greater good. And then people, because we are all people, human beings, and it doesn't work super nice. Everything that I will tell in this talk are actually fictitious. I will try not to cite any names, not to public shame anybody. But if you have a look at my CV, you can probably, well, find out, but I'm not guilty of that. Okay, let's start with metrics. As I mentioned, we are scientific-minded industry, engineering, scientists. So basically, we always try to find better ways to improve ourselves. And in our industry, like in most industry, we apply this engineering principle from Deming, plan, do, check, act. And so in order to check, basically we need to measure. Hi, there is a rub. So here are 3 examples from different themes applied to software. Like, how do you measure productivity? We want productivity to improve every time. We want quality to improve. We want efficiency to improve. So we do this plan, do, check, act, and we always try to do better. I don't know if you know about this stupid stuff, but at some point in time, fortunately, before I started to work, there were some easy way to measure lines of code. So basically, you were productive if you wrote lines of code. And I read a story, and probably it's true, but I have no proof, that one day, one guy at IBM, removed 2,000 of lines of code in one day. So this day, his productivity was negative. So today, that's very funny. But imagine that at the time, it was like the standard. You measure productivity by lines of code. Not great. Another way, frequency of commits. So if you measure your engineers by the frequency of their commits, probably it will be very easy to measure. And nowadays, well, just get on GitHub, use the API and check. But who in their right mind can also think that the number of commits is somehow related to the productivity of engineers? So that's crazy idea. So far, to this day, I didn't find any really good metric to measure productivity. And managers, they hate that. They want to measure productivity. They want to improve productivity. It makes sense. But I didn't find any good metric. Anyway, most organizations will prefer bad metrics than a lack of metrics, which is super sad. I told you I would talk about quality. You will find multiple definitions of quality of software in different channels. My definition, which is as good as any, I believe, is that it's hard to measure quality, but it's easy to measure the lack of quality. So quality is the property that when you add a new feature to existing software, you can add new feature linearly. Whereas the lack of quality, you will start to diverge from this linear and be exponential. And everybody knows about it. When you see this lack of quality in certain software, you reach the point when it's too expensive to add a new feature, and then somebody like proposes to rewrite it from scratch. That definitely shows the lack of quality. In very early in my career, quality was measured with some of those software metrics like abstractness, so the number of like interfaces in an abstract class in a package compared to the number of concrete classes, the afferent couplings, and instability. And basically, I don't know if you remember, I don't know if you used it, but there is a quality platform called SANER. It's especially popular in the Java world, and that's how they measured. They told you about some metrics on your software very early, but nowadays they left it. But I remember this was the most important metrics at the beginning, like 20 years ago. Nowadays, again, not used anymore. It's interesting because it tells you about the tangling of packages together. But if you don't have package in your language, if you don't have like interfaces or abstract classes, even if your language is not like object-oriented, then it's very specific. There is something more interesting. How do you measure the complexity? Again, quality. You will try to make your code easier to read because you write your code once, but you read it like many times, like 20, 100 of times, depending on the life cycle of the software. And so you have this idea of cyclomatic complexity. I believe everybody is like familiar with the idea. Basically, you count the number of different paths. So if you have an if you have a while, if you have a for, if you have loops, anything that adds one, and you want your methods to have the lowest complexity. I remember that at the time it was between 3 and 7. That was the good thing in SANER Q. Like, no, sorry, it was lower than 3. And now I have reactive programming. So here I don't have any if, then else. I just change my methods. So basically, I have a cyclomatic complexity of like 0 because I have one path. I mean, not one path, but here I can write just methods. But underneath, of course, there is a lot of complexity because here you can see if I switch. Now let me check here. I can switch if empty. Here you clearly have the switch, but it's hidden because we are using reactive programming. So depending on the paradigm you use, you will by default have a different cyclomatic complexity, and you cannot measure it in the same way with regular programming. It doesn't work. So again, very good research area. Rule-based quality assessments. And this is also something that SANER does, and probably a lot of other tools do. I will have other examples. You have a rule, and you apply the rule, and you count the number of like warnings you get, and every rule has a severity. And so you can see, hey, like I have 10 broken rules, and you need to fix them, or perhaps it's okay if you don't fix them, but at least you have everything. The problem with this approach is that now every rule is very granular, and that's good, but it depends on the quality of the rules. So you have very easy to get rules and very hard rules, and the severity, depending again on the project, can be like very severe or not. So again, I can tell you about how I failed miserably. 15 years ago, I was using a tool called Amurapi. That's one of the first like rule-based quality assessment engine that I found. It still exists today. It's not maintained, but I found the website. That's crazy. 15 years afterwards. And let's say that I did that, and on my project, I wanted to check the quality, and it told me, hey, you have no Java docs. My God, I had no Java doc on my project. So I am I am a bit, let's say, OCD type of person. And so that couldn't be. I wanted to have zero problems. I wanted to uphold all the rules. So what I did, I created a program to generate the getters and setters, the Java docs for them. And so I fixed all the problem. But did I fix the real problem? No, not at all, because Java docs for getters and setters has zero value. So on one side, I spent time fixing a non-problem, very smartly, I must admit, but on the other side, it brought me nothing. And so you can see a lot of those rules. So for example, Hammurabi has something that says, do not declare runtime exception in the throws clause. So I don't know if you are familiar with Java, but in Java, you have two different kinds of exceptions. You have the checked exceptions, and the checked exceptions mean that you either must like wrap them in a try-catch block or declare them in the signature of the method. And nowadays, a lot of people are pushing against it, saying, hey, checked exceptions are not great because it makes your code less readable. We can argue in one sense or another. And then there are runtime exceptions. Runtime exceptions, well, you don't need to like catch them. They will be automatically like propelled up. They will bubble up your code stack. And so here you have a runtime exception. You still want to mention it in the signature of the method, but Hammurabi tells you, no, it's not good practice. Why? No clue, but it is as it is. SANER cubes, very, very fun rule. Clonables should implement clone. So that's an interesting API that dates back from Java 1.0. The object method as a clone method, the object class as a clone method, but you cannot call it. It will throw an unsupported, it will throw an exception. I don't remember which one. I think it's an unsupported operation exception. And then you've got a clonable interface. And then if you want to use clonable, then you must like extend clonable, implement clonable, and then rewrite the method with clonable, overwrite clonable, clone. Nobody uses clonable anymore. It's actually a sign of a bad design, but we still have this rule that is not used at all. Package names should comply with naming convention. I'm the first one to say, hey, you must use the correct convention, the correct naming convention. So no underscores in package name, only lowercase. Really? Is that really that important? Is it more important than a proper API design, than proper visibility across your packages, than package tangling? Not at all. That's just like form, so not very valuable. Fun parts. I've used HP45. Who knows about HP45? Now I want some interaction. I want interaction. Raise your hands or write in the chat if you know HP45. One person, Alexander, other people? No, okay. Well, it's, sorry for you, Theodore. So that's a great tool brought to us by HP. And I was working once at, let's say, a blue chip company who manufactured coffee and delivered coffee. And we used an e-commerce platform. And once somebody from security decided to run HP45 on it, I received a 300 pages report automatically generated. I had to read this 200 pages report to find 3 problems, 3 security problems. One of them was the real problem, one of them. So that's a lot of noise, believe me. And here is a rule by HP45, like multiple URL patterns mapped to a single servlet. So basically you've got multiple entry points, multiple HTTP endpoints that map to a single servlet. and they say it indicates poor architecture. Well, sorry, that's completely missing the context. It can be true, it can be wrong. You have no clue. And this is the same as for the report, that the report was automatically generated. It was just static analysis, and my internet connection is unstable. Should I switch off my cam, or is it okay? Because I have problems with internet.
Maybe yes.
Yes, okay. Better now?
Yeah, I think it's better now. Yeah.
Okay, you won't see me doing bad stuff then. Okay, okay. And yeah, I told you about the HP45 reports, but it's really, I was not happy with the software. I have also pet peeves like everybody, and in the domain of metrics, I have worked a lot on quality, because as a software architect, I wanted all my projects to have the best maintainability ever. So I wanted tests. I wanted people that people write tests. And now everybody knows that, hey, in the domain of software, you should write tests in order to check if you have written tests. You use code coverage. And I told you that actually I'm not scientific. Well, no, I have no formal computer science education. So this is the best that I can do. This is this formula. This is very hard. And yeah, the code coverage is the number of lines of code that are executed throughout the test suites divided by the number of lines of code. And so it tells you how much tests, how much your production code is covered by your test. And I always say, folks, this is great. This is a good measure because even project managers can understand it. Even I can understand it. I hope there are no project managers among you. It was not a feeble attempt at target you. It's just the plain truth. And I have had an interesting talk, or let's say a chat with Robert Martins, because he is in favor of 100% code coverage. He says that, of course, everybody must have 100% code coverage. And I think this guy has a lot of influence, especially in the coding community, and he says crap. This is crap. So how crap this can be. First, here, this is Java code, but actually you can understand it anyway. I have written a method and I want to test the math class. I want to test how you can add 1 + 1. So if I execute this test, it will be running, it will be good, because here I don't have any assertion. There is no assertion. I don't check the results. So even if the math add returns 3, I have my code coverage. This is crap, believe me. But of course, you know that your team behaves nicely. Nobody would like not write their tests. That's not entirely true. I was in a position once to be a solution architect of an outsourced project. So I was responsible for the quality of code that was produced elsewhere. And at the time, the only tool that I had was code coverage. So I knew that if I ask for a high code coverage, they will probably game it. They will remove the asserts. They will just do some tests on getters and setters just to increase the code coverage. So I asked for 60% out of the box, out of the blue. No idea why 60%. I knew that 80% was what I would have liked, but I knew that it was not feasible. So I asked for 60%. That was really a bad decision, but I had no other option. I could have also asked for 40, but that was definitely too low. Okay, but imagine you are not in this situation. You are working with a good team of good people. They are interns and they want to do their job. So they will always write the asserts. They won't try to game the system. And here I have some tests, and here I have 100% code coverage, and I have the asserts. Who can tell me where the problem is? Yeah, sorry. You were not expected to work today. Any? Yeah, it's not an easy question. Well, if you know the answer, under the limit and +1. No. So thanks, Richard, but it's not the answer. The answer is we should always test at the limits, at the boundary. Always, always, always. There is always, if there is a bug, it's here, it's at the boundary. If you test above the boundary and below the boundary, you will achieve 100% code coverage. But actually, you won't test the boundary. So even code coverage, even if you don't try to gain the metric, it doesn't mean anything because you leave out this test case. And again, I have this solution because I believe it's really great stuff. And it comes from academia, in fact, mutation testing. So with mutation testing, I don't know if you are familiar with it, but basically you rerun the test again, but you slightly change the production code and you check the results. And by changing the production code, if the test still is okay, there must be something fishy. So it detects when you have no asserts. It also detects when you have a missing test case. And it does it, in general, mutation testing does it in a very scientific way. So there is some jittering. It will remove, it will change plus by minus. It will change lower of equal by a lower or the opposites. I mean, it's really a good stuff. But of course, it's not perfect. Because imagine that at some point you have a check that in this case, you should restart the machine. And mutation testing might remove the check, so you will restart the machine. Not great. You will have false positives. So depending on how you write the codes, in some cases, mutation testing will say, hey, there is an issue. In some other cases, it's fine. So you must learn to write the codes in the way that makes mutation testing work. And oh God, it's super slow because of course, you will have all those patterns that needs to be applied to the same source code. So every time it's an exponential explosion. So it can be very, very slow. There are ways to cope with this slowness, but actually it's still not super great. And so on one side, you have an easy measure that project manager can understand, but are meaningless. On the other side, you have something that is much harder to set up, much harder to configure, that is time expensive and gives you much better results. Guess what wins right now? So this is a talk, this is a conference about software maintainability. And yes, when we talk about software maintainability, it's because software needs to be actively maintained. By default, software rots. Software decreases its quality over time if it's not taken care of. But if you have worked with the industry, you know that what doesn't give a benefit, especially a short-term benefit, is undervalued. You won't get any budget. So when you work in the industry, I'm frozen. I knew it. I knew it. I'm still back online. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm sorry. I have very bad internet connection. So when I see you freeze, I know it's not good, but otherwise, just let me know, write in the chat or do anything. So I was telling that, yeah, software maintenance, software maintainability is because software rots. So we need to actively maintain the software, and we need to actively take care of its role. But more importantly, we must teach decision makers how it works. Because if you have worked with the industry, you know that if you don't provide any short-term benefits, then you won't get any budget for something. And so came an abstraction. Hey, let's consider the idea of technical debt. And technical debt is a way to teach decision makers that actually, if you accrue software roads, then it's like a loan. Yes, you can go faster in the short term, but you will need to pay your interest over time, over and over again. And it seems to be a great idea. It maps very well to their way of thinking. But the problem is there is a limit. And the limit is it's how organizations work. It's good if the person who accrues the debt is the one who repays the interest. Like when you go to the bank to ask for a mortgage, you are very cautious about it because, well, you will be the one paying in the end. But organizations, they don't work like that. You go to a role, you get your budgets yearly, and then your idea is to get up the enterprise ladder as fast as possible. You don't want to stay in the role, or you leave for another organization. So the person who actually takes the loan is not the one who pays it. And so nobody cares about technical debt because decision maker, they're not meant to stay in place. Never the one who repays it. Well, I have a mortgage and I must say I repay it. Something also very interesting about efficiency. There is a lot of let's say, hype around something called GraalVM in the Java world. And the idea behind GraalVM, and I love it, let's be clear, I love it, is that you are the bytecodes, the normal bytecodes of a JVM is compiled over time. So it takes a long time to compile. It compiles to machine code. And in the end, the machine code is adapted to the current workload. So for very long running processes, the JVM is a fantastic piece of engineering. Anyway, let's talk about image size, because I went a bit too fast. The idea right now is that you find a lot of articles that tells you how to get the smallest image possible. It's a great idea, but it completely ignores that actually when you've got multiple layers, they can be reused over time. So let's say you have one image that is, let's say, 400 megs, and you have two images, one that uses the other that are 300 megs. And in many cases, it's better to have those two layers, two 300 megs layers, because if you only change the latest, then you only need to download the 300 megs, the one that is changed, and you keep the oldest. So I went a bit too fast. I was talking about GraalVM before. Now it's the time to tell it. So the idea behind GraalVM is you transform the bytecode at build time into native code. So the idea is that, yes, you start faster. Yes, you use less memory. But on the other side, you cannot adapt your native code to the workload. So if you cannot guess the workload, or if the workload changes over time, you cannot adapt it. And you can still see a lot of people advocating for GraalVM every time. Again, it's no context. I just want to finish on Goodhart's law, because that's, in my opinion, that's the core of the issue regarding metrics. When the measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. What I've seen so far is that in order to achieve a goal, you set a metric. Now the metric becomes the goal. People start to game to reach the metric. And everybody, because we are all human, we do the same, even if we know that it's not the good things to do. But if you want to receive your bonus, if you want to get promoted, I mean, again, we are working in an organization, and this is sadly how it works. So this closes the chapter about metrics. Now I want to talk about organizations. Let's be frank. I know this talk is recorded, but we are still among ourselves. All organizations are a mess. They can be industrial, they can be academics. Every organization I know is a mess. The bigger the organization, the bigger the mess. The older the organization, the bigger the mess. So the idea is, well, just find the one you are comfortable with, because yeah, that's how it works. I didn't study business, but I find it always fun to see that organizations are divided into silos. Like you have the CEO, and then you have got the chief marketing officer. Chief marketing officer is in charge of all marketing, they get their budgets. Then you've got the chief sales officer, they've got their budget. Then you've got whatever. So you've got at the top one person. They divide the organization in multiple departments, services, but basically it's silos, and everybody got their budgets. And the underlying assumption is that everybody will try to find the best way to spend their budget. So you will create a lot of local optimums. And of course, when you add all those local optimums, you will find the local max, the global optimum. And I'm not good at mathematics, but that's completely wrong. And all the organizations that I know of, they work the same way. And it doesn't work, but we still continue doing this stuff because it's better to fail knowing we followed a proved path than to start innovative ways. And to illustrate these points, I told you I was working for a blue chip company that provided coffee all over the world. And at some point, we were tasked to develop a connected coffee machine. And so how did it work? Well, the acquisition department got a part of the budget to buy the machine, to buy the connected machine with the chips. And then the software department got money to develop the software. So what happened? Well, the acquisition departments, their goal was to acquire the less expensive chip as possible. They optimized their budget for that. And guess what? The least expensive chip cost us double the software development efforts. So sum of local optimums is not the global optimum, but it's still repeated over and over. Another fun stuff, it's less the case nowadays, but sometimes I can still see it. When I started working as a contractor, we were not regular employees. So basically, you could see in the email if the person you were writing to was a contractor or not, if they were part of the employee workforce or not. And I feel that sometimes it could influence the way you behave with the other person, because of course, as an intern, you have a bit more power than as a contractor. Something also that was very funny, I worked for a bank at some time, and I was tasked to develop software, but because it was a bank and I was the only contractor and they were not used to using contractor, I even didn't know how I ended up there. I didn't access to the software repository. So I had to work on my machine, and then I had to push. It was not push, it was, at the time it was still CDS, so it's a long time ago. I had to push to a CDS, subversion, no, it was subversion. I had to push to the subversion server that my manager had to deploy on their machine, and he had to do the same to the main machine because he had the authorization. And guess what? It was super boring stuff to do, so he never did it. So if my machine crashed, well, all was lost. It didn't crash, but it's still not great. So this is also organizational issue. If you can solve this one, you will be my hero. I will celebrate you until the end of time. That's the worst I've seen. So that's something you need to understand. When you work in the industry as a developer, you are a mind reader because your clients, they are not capable to write what they want. Most of the time, it's very hard, actually. That's why I have a healthy respect for real good business analysts. You know, the business analysts that don't go to the client and make a Christmas wish list, but they push back and say, hey, if you want this, you need to let go of that because those are incompatible requirements. Anyway, 2 anecdotes about this. Same bank. So my specification was an email of a couple of lines describing 3 months of work. I mean, and of course, in this lapse of time, I only get 1 meeting, and only because I really ask for it, because, hey, I have a lot of questions. How can I know this? This is not specified. Should I do A or B? And it's not, it's at every level of hierarchy. Director of business departments ask me, hey, we want to have a rule engine. Okay, you want to have a rule engine. What's the formula you want to set? Oh, we want this formula. Okay, but the more parameters you have, the harder it will be to maintain. So what parameters can change from year to year? And the answer is, it's obvious. That's real good. I mean, what can I answer? So this guy is the stakeholder. He wants us to develop software, but he wants us to read their mind because it's obvious. I mean, I should know about their business. Fun time. Every organization, and I believe in academics, it's even worse, has standards. You've got lots of standards. I mentioned actually that the older the organization, the bigger the mess. So I believe that academics, when sometimes you have hundreds of years of age for some universities, then the standards, they are well developed, and the inertia that goes with it even more so. So you want to keep things organized. That's fine. That's really great because, yeah, we have big organization. We want everybody to have the same, to run in the same direction. So you put standards. But the problem is when the situation changes, you still have the same standards. The standards, the decision to set up a standard was taken in a certain context at a certain time, but the situation has then evolved. But nobody takes time to reassess the standards or to reassess the workflow. I mean, standards, processes, all the same. You should always follow the process. Yeah, but the process was made in these circumstances to prevent this and this failure, and the context has changed. Whatever, we keep the same process. Very important. It's better to fail following the process than to try to succeed outside of it. Because if you fail following the process, you can always say, hey, I'm not guilty, I follow the process. But if you take initiative, if you because you know that actually there is a better way, oh my God, that was really bad. That will be really bad. Even if you succeed, you probably will be blamed whatsoever. Scott writes, my training was in physics for organization, standards and inertia. See later. Yes, definitely. Tom writes, to which extent is industry really different from academia? Many of the issues that you mentioned for software producing organizations also seems to apply to us researchers. Yes, since universities are organization, definitely. One can find numerous examples of analogy of the roots of evil. Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's why I say in the organization, because I believe that's an organizational problem. It's not bounded to industry versus academic. I believe that we can start with industry, we can start with academics, but if we find the solution, you can apply it anywhere. But it's something else. But yeah, definitely. That's why I always use the word organization, because it can be not only enterprise, it can be like NGOs, like organization, not-for-profit organization. Any organization will have those problems. Budget-oriented development. That's something very funny also. We hire X people because we have a budget. And because we've spent the budget, we need to keep the developers. And the underlying assumption is, hey, every developer has at least zero productivity. And it's a very wrong assumption. I've seen developers with negative productivity. So let me tell you about one more of my failing. Now you will understand why I'm so experienced, because I failed lots and lots of time. Now I know a lot more than before. So at one point I was tasked to manage a developer. I didn't interview him. I had no choice. It was, hey, now you have this headcount. He should work on the project. Okay, fine. And the guy at the beginning asks me, like after 2 hours of work, asked me a very, at least I considered it a very, very basic and silly question. So this day I was not feeling particularly patient. Well, I'm not patient in general, but I really started to be angry and say, hey, blah, blah, blah. So the guy gets back to his desk and I don't hear about him for the whole day. And at the end of the day, he comes back to me and says, hey, I have this problem. And the thing is, because I didn't answer very nicely, he understood he shouldn't disturb me. And he was not skilled at all. So every time he stumbled upon a blocker, he checked on Stack Overflow and he copy-pasted the first answer. And then blocked him, but he diverged more and more from the normal path, from the relevant path. So, and at the end of the day, he was like completely horizontal, completely perpendicular to the normal path. And whatever he did was always wrong. So at the end of the day, he had no choice but to come to me. So first I realized my mistake. And then I got an architect to manage him. And what the architect did is every evening, he took 2 hours to rewrite the code of the guy. So a developer can have negative productivity. But because we are an organization, and once a budget is spent, we cannot change anything. We cannot just say, hey, just stay in the corner. Because again, the assumption is a developer has at least zero productivity, which is wrong. People, I think this one you cannot do anything, but I just want it to be complete, and I have 7 minutes, so I need to like speed up. If you are French, then you understand this expression. If you speak French, you probably understand this expression. For the English speaking, l'enfer c'est les autres means hell is others. So all the problems in the world come from others. I don't know if you agree, but let's say that sometimes life would be easier without. Another anecdote that happened to me. So somebody in your team decides that he knows better and it doesn't ask about anything. It just changes the code, it commits it. And because there is a review process, he asks somebody else, not you, not somebody from the team, but somebody completely unrelated with enough power so that once the code has been reviewed, then it's considered good enough and it can be merged. And afterwards, it's a fait accompli because, well, it wouldn't just need like a lot of time to undo the stuff and to talk to the guy and blah, blah, blah. So good stuff, really great. This is not what I wanted to talk about. This was this one. Sorry. This one is, yes. The road to hell is paved with good intention. Yes, in that case, I would say, I have a slide for that. Let's talk about it afterwards. I've seen that in an illustration, like an expert, or let's say somebody who thinks he's an expert, decide that an open source framework, in that case Hibernate, is badly designed. It has a lot of flaws. I know better. So basically, he knows better than a team of people who has really worked or dedicated a significant portion of their life on that, and he writes one from scratch. And of course, he doesn't know that much. Even if he knows good stuff, he is only a single person. And so they are like, it lacks features and there are bugs and whatever. And it goes so badly that actually when he's on vacation, the organization has to call him back because he's the only one who understands this piece of code. Welcome to the problem. Now the administration, the organization allowed that, and now they are doomed with this proprietary mess for the end of time. This one, I talked about it. So you wrote, Scott, you wrote, the road to hell is paved with good intention. I think it's more of an ego problem. I know better. I've seen it a lot. Technology, whatever it is super popular. You want it on your resume, so you will use it on your project, regardless whether it's relevant or not. And most of the case, it's not relevant. Again, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I don't remember exactly, but a long time ago, I was working in a bank. We were using Java EE. At the time, it was still called G2E, so Java 2 Enterprise Edition. And we were using EGBs. At the time, it was only EGBs 2. But there were like specification and some codes that were written for EGB3. So basically, you could still play with EGB3s, but the application server, so the production infrastructure, was not ready. And there were no products that were supposed to run EGB3, but the guy wanted to have EGB3 on its resume. So basically, he just fast-talked the management into saying, hey, no, that's fine, we will do this and this, which was, of course, completely crap. He had EGB3 on his CV. And when at the time of the deployment, I don't know what happened, because there was no server available to run EGB3. Good stuff. So don't despair, whole hope is not lost. And that is my address to you, because you are the one to solve those problems. And I'm not, I'm just here to dump all my problems on you. So you've got a lot of potential research area, metrics that are relevant and hard to gain. That's, in my opinion, very, very important. If you are more about sociology, then you can find organizational patterns that work and team patterns that work. So far, I found nothing. If you have a team of like people who want to work together, it will work, whatever the methodology. If you have somebody inside the team who wants to play solo, it will be a mess. I think we can work a lot on that. And for people, well, people will be people. I'm not the best people ever. So I don't think I can change myself. So I don't want you to change anybody else, that's for sure. So thanks for your attention. I think I'm in 1 hour. So I think I held the timing. You can follow me on Twitter. You can check my GitHub and you can ask me like one minute of questions. And I will try to switch on my camera again. I don't know if the network will be good. I don't know why it's. Wow.
we don't have much time for questions. Thanks. Because the next session starts exactly at.
I'm really sorry. I wanted to ask that and then I got carried away.
But still, we do have, first of all, thank you very much for the great presentation. It was really mind-blowing in sense that some of these problems are here for years or for decades. So I would suggest that we can discuss some of the questions in the audience, and if people have to move to other rooms, they can simply go there.
Sure.
I don't see any questions, so if I may start with one, I share your view about the problems and the concerns with low-level metrics, and certainly gaming them is a problem. But wouldn't the solution be to move to more higher-level metrics, like the accelerate metrics that, for example, measure the lead time to change, which are much more difficult to game and are probably much more meaningful to an organization?
Yes. On this exact metric, I cannot say because, but I have the same problem of measuring in my role now. Now I'm a developer advocate, so basically I'm talking about Apache API 6, and people want to measure how good I am at this. So do people for my talks they come, or what impact do I have to see if I'm worth the salary they are giving me, of course. And basically, there are two kinds of metrics. The first kind are easy to measure, like how many talks did you give? That's very easy to measure metric. And probably I will go through the roof because I like to do talks. But how can you gauge the impact? For example, it will be easier for me to do online talks because I don't need to move. So I can do one talk online in Amsterdam and the other in the afternoon in the US. Very easy, but there is less engagement online. And then there is like, what's your impact? Let's measure the number of, I don't know, the number of community members, the numbers of visits to our website. Okay, but that doesn't mean anything. And what's the impact? How can you like link one visit to the talk I give? Because the visit can be made 2 weeks afterwards. Or perhaps the person will remember my talk and 2 years afterwards, they will decide to use Apache API 6. When you have such, the problem is the short-term measurement of long-term goals. In the industry, we are bound by quarters. Like in sales, you check every quarter. Sales is very easy to measure. How much did you sell? You get your bonus easy. Everything that is above or below, depending on how you see it, is very hard. You are an engineer. Whatever it can be, software, mechanic, whatever. You're an engineer, you build a product, somebody sells it. How much did you contribute to the value? Sorry, I have a lot of questions. That's why you are here to answer. This problem of like evaluating, of measuring to improve is very pervasive. We think that again, plan, do, check, act. Yes, it works. But what exactly do you want to check? How do you want to check? Because whatever you measure, it will change my behavior. Yep. If you measure me by my number of commits, I will break down my code by like many commits, whether it's relevant or not. If you measure me by my lines of code, I will write many more lines of code than necessary. It's a hard problem.
Thank you. Thank you. There are two questions on the chat. Thanks for the talk. Do you think moving to microservices also has a positive effect on the organization?
I think it has a very negative effect. Very. When we started talking about microservices, we were talking about Conway's law. Conway's law is the fact that your architecture reflects, your organization reflects on your architecture. So if you want to have microservices, you need to have self-contained teams, one team, one microservice. Makes sense. What happens right now? We completely forgot Conway's law, and we are doing microservices. So everything is done from the technical point of view, and the organization doesn't change at all. So you will get all the downsides of microservices, like no transactions, whatever, plus you won't get any of the benefits. So if your organization is not designed around like two pizzas team or whatever you want to call them, you will fail. And as tech persons, you cannot change the organization. You cannot lead the change to an organization. You must be much, much higher in the hierarchy. If you want to change the organization, then if you want to do microservices, first change the organization, and it will naturally lead to microservices. The problem right now is any organization with a big enough size needs to have middle managers. 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, more layers. Let's face it, most of those middle managers, they are completely useless. I've always told, if your role is to accept my vacation requests, do reporting that can be automated, and be the proxy for my salary raise every year, you are really overpaid. Of course, I exaggerate, but only a bit. I've had good middle managers, really good, but a few, like no more than 5 in 20 years. Those middle managers, if you have 2 pizzas team, what is their role? Now you can see that their role is very small indeed, because they cannot be head of department or head of whatever. They are head of nothing. They just do reporting, tell you your salary raise, and accept your vacation. No, not even accept your vacation request. Now you removed one responsibility because the team is self-organized. So the people who actually will be losing a lot are middle managers, and they are the only one that you can rely on to change the organizations. So in any existing organization, and I'm not an organizational consultant, but my experience is in any organization that is like standards, you cannot do microservices properly. If you start an organization from scratch and you design it from scratch to have those autonomous team, it can work. Otherwise, you are doomed.
Interesting perspective. Thank you, Nicolas, for that. Is there any other question from the audience?
Can
Yes, please go ahead.
Can I ask? Okay. I wanted to notice or to ask how the transition to microservices is connected to the current trend of transitioning to agile software project management, because this is also an area where we see kind of transitioning. We see many companies trying to transform themselves to agile project development, but fail to do so, or inevitably adopted some parts of agile to their own culture and end up doing a mix of things.
Well, again, I must agree, and I even more negative, but again, that might be my French side, is that right now I see organizations saying they are agile, but they are just doing another sort of ritual, applying different titles to the same processes. So now you don't have a project manager, you have a scrum master, but they do the same stuff. So you don't have the same reporting, but every day you still need to be like in a circle and tell what you did. Remember, normally you should stand up, because the idea was if it was too long, it would be painful and people would leave. How long do you stay in your stand-up? 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Well, my back cannot stand 20 minutes. So the idea is that it's very easy for organization to change their title, to like just add some or change a bit their ritual, but don't change the overall. The inertia in organization, as I mentioned, and somebody else mentioned, academia, in industry, is the worst that can happen. I've worked for a couple of public administration. It's really crazy, crazy. I have a lot of anecdotes, so bear with me, I still have one. This organization 15 years ago decided they would need their own framework. At the time, it was a good idea because there was nothing as open source. So every company had their own framework. So they developed their own framework. And after a while, the framework became successful, became widespread. And because people didn't have choice, there was a framework that had to do it. Meanwhile, the context around it changed. And now came a lot of different open source frameworks, but they kept using the same framework. So far, so good, more or less. Less because there was no reassessment whether proprietary framework was good. Now comes the real mind blower. The team that created the framework was disbanded. So no maintenance on the framework anymore. The people were split into other parts of the organization. Still no reassessment whether we should still rely on this non-maintained proprietary framework or not. Okay, now I come and I say, hey folks, your batches right now, they use this proprietary framework standard that is not maintained anymore. Now I can do the same with Spring Batch. It's an open source stuff. It is maintained. There are regular versions. There are code reviews. A lot of people are writing about it. It took me 1 year from the start of the proposal to Spring Batch being accepted equally with the non-supported, non-maintained proprietary framework as a standard. 1 year. I spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, and I gained nothing. But the pride of having improved the situation a bit. I can fully understand that nobody else would have done that. It's crazy. It brings me nothing, just pain and tears and sweat and toil. But at the time, I was very, let's say, involved in my mission. I wanted to change the world. I wanted to improve everything. That's how organizations work. Inertia. Nobody cares. Let's follow the process.
Was there, I think there was another question from someone. There is a question. Daniel, would you like to ask?
Yes, actually another attendant asked the question on the chat. Can you see the message? Code may not be good and consolidation is required. Newcomers may feel tempted to rewrite everything from scratch or even move to another tools. How to balance this? Any tip?
Maybe I can explain that. Yeah. So,
sorry?
Yeah, maybe I can explain that. Yeah. So my name is Fernando Varela and I work at CERN. So we have a small team of developers. We provide tools centrally. We provide actually a framework that was developed over the last 20 years. And, we know that the code is far from being ideal. Yeah, but, and every now and then we have newcomers that come and they question, the quality of the code. They have, of course, all these very nice ideas. It's very difficult to justify, to their eyes, that we don't really invest in consolidation. However, so this is as you presented in your very nice presentation, by the way, there is a significant effort behind that. And especially the management that has to be convinced about it. Yeah? They have to see what is the added value in that. So I was wondering if you had any tip, to give me on how to, balance this, emphasis from the newcomers to change everything, to rewrite everything from scratch, and understanding that the code is like that for a reason, and it's not that simple. Even if you now rewrite something from scratch, or you introduce a new tool in the system, you will actually complicate more the whole scenario.
Well, your question has a lot of different aspects. So if you are from CERN, we are not far away, because I live like on the other side of the border in Saint-Julien-en-Genevois. So hello.
Okay.
Salut. So first, about convincing the management. That's for me the hardest part. And that's one of the reasons why I left consulting, is because if I am at the point where I have to spend a non-trivial time to convince somebody who doesn't know my job to invest some money, then I believe that I'm in the wrong organization. And basically, I made the choice that I will now only work for startups because they are small, and only work for companies that are focused on IT, because they understand stuff. Basically, I don't have to explain them about test, about code coverage, it's a shared understanding. So for the management convincing part, I'm sorry, but I cannot help you, because if I'm at this point, I will just leave, say, sorry, folks, you don't trust me, that's fine, bye-bye, have fun. I understand you are not in this situation, but I have no good answer. About the part where you are at the point where you need to do something, that's the problem. As I mentioned, software roles, and like any entropy, if you catch it at the end, of course, when you are at the end, it's better to rewrite everything from scratch than to do something. Then if you don't actively maintain it over time, and it's not your fault, it's probably over like years of neglect, then and you inherit the situation, I'm sorry for you. You have all my sympathy, but again, it's too late. About people who want to rewrite everything from scratch, that's very easy. Like hire less skilled developers. Good, passionate, skilled developers will always want to make everything really good. You just want good enough. So don't hire for passion, just hire people who want to work from 9 to 5, do their job, get home. It's not a really good thing to hear, but I think that in this case, it's the best advice I can give.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I insist, a very, very nice talk. I really subscribe to most of the messages that you passed during the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Are there any questions? If there are no questions, maybe we can end this keynote so that our attendees can join the other sessions. Okay, let's thank Nicolas again. Very impressive talks. Thank you for your sharing. Okay, thank you.
A lot, everybody. I'm sorry I couldn't be more positive, but as I mentioned, from the title of the talk, that was a talk of problems. So now you are the one to solve it, and I will be very happy to read your research and your results, because I expect a lot, as you can see. Thanks.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the talks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.